Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. This is Beyond Aesthetics, the Business of Beauty. We provide business, legal, and industry expertise to aesthetic providers. We're delighted to present Hillard Sterling. Hillard is a common commercial litigator and trial lawyer with 30 years of experience bringing cases to successful resolutions through settlement, judgment, and verdict in tribunals across the country. He brings a strategic, creative, and focused approach to his clients' cases and disputes, and a wealth of litigation and trial experience ranging from big law to boutique. Hillard's matters span the spectrum of commercial and insurance defense matters, including professional liability cases, defending agents, brokers, and financial advisors, technology system implementation disputes, representing vendors and customers, cyber matters, the topic of today, which include breach coaching and counseling clients on risk reduction, privacy cases, defending clients against allegations of wrongful disclosures and access, defamation claims, defending and bringing claims on behalf of private and public figures, intellectual property, defending against infringement allegations, and a panoply of other business disputes representing companies, shareholders, and LLC members. Hillard has served as an expert commentator in print and broadcast media on breaking stories in the technology law realm. He also speaks at conferences across the country regarding a wide range of technology and cyber issues. My gosh, we are so pleased that you could join us today, Hillard. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Nell, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to talking with you about cybersecurity.
Yes, very good. That's the hot topic of today. And I think so many people underestimate the danger that being vulnerable to hackers can be for a business. And so I think having you here today to emphasize the importance of businesses taking care of their back offices as well as their front offices is very, very key, very important. I just want to also say that Hillard is a shareholder and attorney with Roetzel and Andress. It's a firm that's based in Chicago. So thank you for joining us today in Chicago. It looks like the weather's nice and clear there.
Yes, we have a very pretty day today, which is rare for Chicago.
Very nice.
Chicago is hitting, I'm proud to say, hitting 65 degrees today, which is quite startling for mid-November.
Yes, that's ideal for November. Yes. My goodness. So would you tell us a little bit about yourself, Hillard?
Certainly. Thank you again for the opportunity to talk today. I have been practicing law for about 34 years. I graduated from Georgetown University Law Center way back in 1989. I started off in big law. So I started with very large law firms, starting with Arlen Porter and then Kirkland & Ellis. I got a lot of good trial experience there. And I was fortunate because I started my career with a lot of technology cases. And this was way back before cyber. This is before the term cyber was coined, and before, in fact, the internet was out there. So I transitioned as the years evolved and the technology evolved into cybersecurity as part of my technology practice. And for me, it's very rewarding because what I do is I try to protect the victim. I protect companies, first of all, from being hacked in the first place by giving them advice like I'll be hoping to give all of your listeners today, and also helping them after they've been breached. So they're not victimized twice, first by the hacker and then by a plaintiff's lawyer who will be around if the breach is big enough. to try to profit from that by getting attorney's fees in class action lawsuits. So the advice I'm giving today both is helpful in terms of avoiding a breach and then being able to defend against a plaintiff's lawyer if and when a lawsuit is launched because someone wants to argue that one of your listeners was not careful enough in protecting the company's data.
Very good. Very impressive and important work that you do, Hillard.
Thank you.
So how did you decide to become an attorney?
Well, that's a great question. I just always knew that I wanted to go into either, when I was very young, either acting or the law. I just really enjoy performing. I enjoy talking with people. I enjoy interacting. And as I got closer to school, I got closer to going to college and thinking hard and fast about what really I could make a living at. The acting gig fell far away. I saw that how difficult that is. So I decided at that point I was going to go to law school, and that's the path I chose to take.
Oh, and you stuck to it. Excellent. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
You have a slideshow for us today. So shall we get right to it?
Yeah, let's do that. Are you controlling the slides now?
Yes, I will. Mm-hmm.
Great. Excellent. Well, I'll just start by letting everyone know that what you're about to hear, and this is sort of a disclaimer that you see before TV shows and commercials, that this information may distress some viewers out there. This is a area, cybersecurity, in which everyone is facing significant risk. But I just don't want to focus on the risk. I want to focus on the solutions. My goal today is for everyone to walk away with 2, 3, 4, 5 tangible action items that you can take right now to reduce the risks of either getting breached in the first place, or if you do get breached, to make sure that the problem is a lot smaller than it otherwise would be. So you're going to hear, especially at the beginning of the discussion today, a lot about risk, a lot about danger, a lot about exposure. But really the prime message I'm trying to give you is that this is a call to action. That the fear is not to be used to cower and to hide, but to act and to undertake some measures that you could take right now to reduce your cyber risks. So with that, why don't we go to the next slide?
Okay, we'll dive right in.
You all may be thinking, why are you even talking to me about this? I'm a medical spa owner or employee. So we don't really have cybersecurity risks. The opposite is true. Medical spas and companies like medical spas are prime targets for hackers out there. They love that. They love that opportunity for several reasons. One is that you have a lot of very sensitive information about your customers and your employees. This is very important information, very valuable information for hackers. They're able to get that information, and especially if it's healthcare related, which a lot of it is, they'll be able to make a lot of money off of that on what they call the dark web, which is the internet that you don't see, the internet where wrongdoers are communicating and selling information. And they get a lot more money for healthcare information than any other type of information out there. So you're low-hanging fruit for them also, because a lot of medical spas, understandably, are not necessarily hyper-focused on their technology. There are a lot of smaller companies. There are a lot of companies that do not have IT departments. Typically, you're relying on off-the-shelf software, and those software products are very vulnerable to hackers. Hackers are extremely sophisticated. They know how to get around firewalls, software patches, security software products. They really are great at what they do. That's why we have to be extra vigilant in making sure that we're protecting your systems properly. So you are low-hanging fruit that hackers are going after medical spas all the time. Just go to Google after this presentation is over and type in medical spas and cybersecurity or hacks and breaches. You're going to see a lot of stories out there, and they're not good. And it's happening now. As I said, you could see this on Google, and the way they get into the systems, no matter how great your software programs are, is through human error. We've all probably heard the term phishing. If you haven't, you've seen phishing. This is not going to a lake with a reel and a rod. This is a scheme, a scam in which these hackers send emails that look like they're legitimate emails from vendors, from friends, perhaps from your CEOs or your colleagues, asking you to click on something or to double click on an attachment. Once you do that, and these are very sophisticated hacks, they're in. They plant malware in your systems, and they can do all kinds of things with that. One scheme is ransomware, where they can lock up your computers. This is happening every day, thousands of times in every locale across the country. They lock up your systems, and then they send you a message. If you want your system unlocked and you want your data back, you have to pay us a ransom. Typically, it's in Bitcoin, and you have to send it off. And once you send it and it's out the door, it's gone. We'll talk about ways to reduce the risks of ransomware, but it's happening. Another scam that you see that's very prevalent is wire fraud. You'll get an email from, maybe it's your boss, the CEO, or a vendor that you transact with, asking you to wire some money. And they'll say, oh, we changed our bank account information. We'd like you to send it to this new account. And it looks really legitimate. And that's because the hacker is between you and the person you think you're speaking with. They get right in the middle of it. And they're the ones you're communicating with. And they'll send you their bank account information with communications that look very legitimate. This is a scheme that works all the time. Also, in the medical spa arena, there's a lot of instances in which these hackers, once they get into your systems, they're charging your customers' credit cards. They get the credit card information. Your customers get charged, and it's tough for them. It's not good for business. So with all those types of risks, again, we're focusing on fear. I know that is part of the task today. It's not the main task. It's a call to action because of all of these dangers that are out there and prevalent that probably have happened to you already. And if they haven't, be careful. They probably will.
Right. And they're looking for the weakest links. So if a business is not reinforcing its cybersecurity, they could be vulnerable. And just witness what happened in Las Vegas, the casinos that were shut down for days.
Great example.
It's not a small matter.
No, it's not. And for every casino that you hear about getting breached or medical spa that you see on Google that gets some publicity, there are 1,000 others that just don't get the publicity because the media doesn't know about them. They're handled privately. We'll talk about ways you handle it when you're breached, but you're absolutely right now. Look at the headlines and then realize you don't want to be on that headline as the next breached company.
No.
Why don't we talk about legal standards if you'd like, and go to the next slide.
Okay.
The next question arises, well, I see it's happening all the time. Well, why am I being held liable for this? The fact is, and the law is, there are all kinds of legal standards that apply to medical spas and similar companies that govern your conduct. And you need to comply with each and every one of these laws, or you will be found liable. And I guarantee you, there are lots of plaintiffs' lawyers out there who would love to file a lawsuit and argue that you have failed to comply with one, two, or all of these different standards. I've listed several main ones, starting from the ones that apply uniquely in the healthcare arena. There's HIPAA. Most of us know that our healthcare information is protected. Customers' healthcare information is protected and covered by HIPAA. HIPAA has all kinds of laws, rules, and regulations pertaining to cybersecurity. So are you complying with HIPAA? And if you don't know, you need to find out. There are all kinds of state laws. HIPAA is a federal law. There's all kinds of state laws that cover healthcare information specifically, but data generally. And there's a whole widespread spectrum of state laws that apply here. There are consumer protection laws in every state that preclude you from engaging in what they call unfair or deceptive practices. And plaintiffs' lawyers have no problem arguing that if there was a breach that you were engaging in unfair or deceptive practices. It's relatively straightforward for them to do that. There are regulations out there, guidelines, and here's where things start getting fuzzy because you have relatively vague and ambiguous standards, but they're still applicable to you. You still have to comply with them. And let's go to the last one, reasonableness. Ask yourselves, am I being reasonable in protecting my companies and my clients' data? That's a very difficult question to answer, but it's the one you need to be asking. Reasonableness is a standard that every one of us, every one of our companies must be held liable to, responsible to, because it's the governing standard of negligence theory. And it applies to every single person and company in the country. And if you get breached, some plaintiff's lawyer out there who wants to make money off of it is going to argue that you weren't acting reasonably. It's very easy for them to do that. It's almost by definition, if there's a data breach, something happened that was wrong, and someone can argue that you were unreasonable. So these are the various standards to which you need to be held and that you need to be aware of and that you need to comply with.
Pretty complex landscape too. So your help is very much appreciated, I'm sure, navigating all of these regulations.
Thank you. That's my point. And in fact, that gets us right to the next slide. How do I comply with this? What do I do? And if you're doing everything on this slide, you're acting reasonably. Certainly, at least in my view. A plaintiff's lawyer may disagree, but this is the way to protect yourself and to comply with all those different laws and regulations. And we're going to go through each of these in some greater detail during the course of our discussion today. But let's run through them briefly. There is a three-legged stool of strong defense. Each of these legs are equally important. You lose one, the stool falls over. It's people, process, and technology. You need to be acting on all of those fronts reasonably or better than reasonably. And we'll talk about what that really means. I know that's kind of amorphous right now, but we'll talk more about that.
Okay, good.
How do you implement your policies and train people? Do you have policies in place governing cybersecurity? Do you have policies telling employees how they should be using their email, how they should not be using their email? How about their mobile devices? Do you have policies governing that? We're going to look at some important specifications of policies that need to be in place, but they just don't need to be in place. You need to be communicating and training your employees on what these policies state. It's true that not training your employees on policies is almost worse than having no policies at all, because then you have something out there that you're not communicating, and someone can argue that you're being negligent because you have not adequately trained your colleagues about it. So that's another important tangible measure to protect your risk. Reducing your data footprint is critical. Are you saving all of your emails? Why? If you are, why? Are you saving all of your documents? Do you have a data retention program in place where your computer cycles through and deletes emails and documents automatically unless they're subject to other important conditions to preserve them? Do you have an aggressive and compliant data retention policy? Because the more that you save, the more risk you have. The more emails that are out there, the more emails that someone can hack. And by the way, the more emails that you have, if you get sued for something else, someone's going to be able to get by a document request. All cases these days are won and or lost on a handful of emails. So why are you saving everything? You're creating more risk. We'll also talk about protecting your communications under what we call the attorney-client privilege. So negative information is such that you could hopefully hold it back from someone who wants to do you harm with it. So we'll talk about the attorney-client privilege. And everyone who's listening to this, I hope you have cyber insurance. If you don't have it, get it. It can protect your company. Wouldn't you rather have an insurance company paying for a data breach rather than your company? And this is not academic. Again, you'll see it if you go out there and Google. Medical spas are going out of business after a hack because it's so expensive to notify your customers. It's devastating reputationally for your customers and prospective customers. And if you end up getting sued or you investigated by a regulator and you're writing the check, that could be a years of revenue for you. And so it's happening where medium and smaller companies, including medical spas, are going out of business. Wouldn't you want an insurance policy to protect you from that? So we'll talk about some of those measures. In fact, the next slide, Nell, if you want to go to it, is this three-legged stool of people, process, and technology. And here are some bullet points that define a bit more what that really means. These are steps that really everyone should be taking to have each of these different three processes in place, these three dynamics in place. Are you prioritizing your data based on what the risk is? So customers' healthcare information needs to have special protections technologically and process-wise. So you can't just treat all data equally. They're not equal. Some data gets special legal protections. Healthcare information falls directly in that category. So prioritize your data based on the risks that you face with that data, and then implement the protective measures accordingly. Do you have a data governance plan in place? Probably not, quite frankly, because not a lot of companies have it, but you really should get that in place. That defines, how am I protecting my data? What data is important? What data is a little less important? How are we protecting each and every one of these prioritized types of data? Do you have an incident response plan? That's a playbook. That's the playbook that says something bad happens, here's what we're going to do to fix it. If we get some ransomware, here are the 10 steps we're going to take. If we have a data breach, or I think that someone hacked our system, here's the 5 to 10 steps we'll take. Very important to have a game plan in place. Just like any sports team, you don't have a playbook, you're going to lose.
And right, no plan, no strategy.
Right?
Yeah.
That's not the way we run our businesses, right? I mean, everyone has strategies for how they're going to succeed. And that's no exception in the data security arena. It's not enough to have a plan, though. You have to practice it. And that's what tabletop exercises are all about. Simulations where everyone gets in a room, and that's why they call them tabletop exercises. You get in a conference room and you run through the different scenarios with your incident response plan, and you practice. Now we're going to talk about how, when you're doing that, this gets to the last bullet point there, that red one at the end, use your attorney-client privilege to protect the information you're generating with tabletop exercises. So let me tell you what that means. So you get in a room, in a conference room, you're doing tabletop exercises. People are taking notes. People are writing emails after the exercises. Perhaps there are handouts. All that information, electronic and hard copy, is discoverable. All of it can be found and handed over to a plaintiff if you get sued. You don't want that, because all that information is going to be very problematic. You're going to really focus in these tabletop exercises on your weaknesses. So you're taking a very self-critical look at how you're strong, how you're not strong, which is even more important. You don't want to hand all that to an adversary. How do you protect it? You use the attorney-client privilege. Get a lawyer in the room, and this is not just a commercial. I really mean this, and it's happening all over the place. It doesn't have to be me, but it should be outside counsel. It should be someone who's not just your inside counsel, maybe someone who you employ if you're a big enough medical spot. Get an outside lawyer there. Why is that important? Because courts are very skeptical about protecting information with the attorney-client privilege if you don't have an outside lawyer involved, because the standard for protecting information under the privilege is that it has to be to help a lawyer provide legal advice. So if there's no lawyer there at all, or you have your in-house lawyer who may have another hat on, like a VP, your adversary is going to argue, that's not attorney-client privilege. That's just regular old business information. You weren't focused on helping a lawyer analyze and address your legal risks. You were focusing on just protecting your company, and that's not under the attorney-client privilege. So talk to an outside lawyer about, hey, how do I protect my information? Because I want to do these tabletop exercises. Can you help me? Very important. Policies is the next category. And we're going to go through a couple of these policies. They're But you should have policies governing all of these different areas. Access, use, and transmission of data, your email use, your mobile devices, laptops, and how are you and your colleagues using social media? Again, it's okay to have these policies, but we're going to look at the first red bullet point in that second column, training. You got to train your employees what the policies say. Give them quizzes, give them tests. If they fail, retrain them. Very important. So these are and metrics, measuring the success rate of your efforts is very important, because then at least you know where you're strong, and even more important, where you're weak. So you can get better and stronger and protect yourself before and during and after a data breach.
Do you have standard policies that you can start people off with?
Yes.
They can refine?
Absolutely. Short answer, absolutely yes.
Mm-hmm.
Don't pull them off of LegalZoom or Chat GPT. It's garbage in, garbage out. We've all heard the stories with artificial intelligence out there, and it's more artificial than intelligent. So you could find policies on the internet, but be careful about using those. I do have standard policies I'm happy to help provide. And yeah, there's fine tuning that's going to be necessary, because
it's important to have them vetted by someone who is qualified, like yourself.
Well, yeah, certainly don't rely on Mr. Google. He's not going to be a very good witness at trial.
Understood.
So
I'm going to go out and reduce my footprint on the internet. I have too many email accounts. I can delete ones that are more than 6 months old and then just pay attention to the more current ones. So I do have too big of a footprint, and I didn't realize until you mentioned that was a vulnerability that I had as an individual and as a business owner.
No, you're not alone. I would say 95% of people and companies have more emails in their systems and are keeping them than they really should. Think about this. Think about some of the emails that may not be ones you're that proud of, or ones that you don't want published. Maybe you have emails dealing with customer disputes or other emails, and they're sitting in your system. Do you want someone to get their hands on those? Let's say you have a customer who comes back at you, gets a lawyer, hires a lawyer, files a complaint in court, and then serves a document request on you. Picture that email that you're not all that proud of in back of you on a 10-foot screen, and you have to talk about it under oath. So it's better if it doesn't exist. It's like a tree falling in the forest. No one knows it. No one sees it. You don't have to explain it. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Nell. I think everyone should take that lesson, and it's a good step for everyone to think about.
Thank you for bringing it up.
Absolutely. So why don't we talk more about technology on the next slide? This is one of the key legs of this three-legged stool, technology. So what do I do is the question I'm sure everyone is asking themselves. Here are some of the ways. These are best practices. These are some of the ways that you should be protecting your company right now. If you're doing these action items, you're likely not negligent. In other words, you're being reasonable. But you need to be doing all of these, because now these have all become bare minimum standards of conduct out there. Email encryption is absolutely essential. You should be encrypting email at the sending point of it, the receipt point, and the storage point. Encryption technology is very easy to get now. It used to be, not that long ago, that encryption technology was very expensive and wasn't all that effective. Now you can encrypt emails with the click of your mouse. If you have Office 365, for example. So are you encrypting your emails? How about your stored emails? That's not Office 365, that's on your server. Are those encrypted? They should be, because then when the hackers get them, they can't understand them. It's legal mumbo jumbo. So it's just, characters. So get encryption, do encryption. And that's at the point of sent, receipt, and storage. Password protection. Do you all have complex passwords you're using? Are you changing your passwords frequently enough? I hope your password isn't the word password. I hope it's not the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Unfortunately, those are the two most famous popular passwords out there in use today. Don't do that. Use special characters, use numbers, use words, use a saying, a slogan that would be difficult for someone to guess, or more importantly, in these days, difficult for another computer program to guess, because these hackers are running these password detecting programs that run millions of different variations to try to get into your system. If you have very difficult passwords, complex passwords, those programs don't work nearly as effectively. So protect yourself there. Do you have firewalls? It's an easy technology step. This is back in Technology 101 decades ago. The first security technological component were firewalls. You should have a really good firewall in place. Are you backing up your data? That's really important, because if someone locks up your system with some ransomware and you don't want to pay or can't pay the ransom, if you have backups out there that are sitting away from your systems, then you can reconstruct your information. You may lose a couple of days, you may lose some of your work product, but at least you'll have a nice critical mass of information that you could resurrect your systems with, instead of paying this ransom to this wrongdoer. Don't open up Wi-Fi in Starbucks. I know we're all tempted to do it. It's really easy and fun, but it's bad. It's risky, because that Wi-Fi that you may be tapping into, that may not be Starbucks Wi-Fi. That may be Mr. Hacker's Wi-Fi, because he's sitting in the corner with his laptop watching you. Okay, don't use public Wi-Fi, especially if you're doing work. If you don't care, you're just doing personal stuff, that's different. But if your computer, smart device, mobile phone, cell phone, if your device has both work and non-work information on it, don't use public Wi-Fi. Can you wipe your smartphone from afar? We all can if we have iPhones or Androids. They all have that great technology. Have you enabled it? Do you understand how to wipe it? Are you educating your clients about technological issues, so that they understand that they need to protect their data as well? And your vendors too. We'll talk about vendors in a minute. But you mentioned the point, weakest link, now earlier on. You're only as strong as your weakest link. And if someone has your data or giving you data and it's not properly treated and protected, that can be very dangerous and risky. So be proactive. Review, update, look at this list. Are you doing all of it? If not, give it a shot. It's very important, because again, this is all the necessities of being reasonable and not being negligent. Why don't we talk about third parties for a second now, because I think this ties right into this whole issue.
All right, sure.
Links. Third party, all of us use vendors in our business, right? You have vendors who are providing services for you, products to you. You may have vendors that you're exchanging information with. How are they being protected? Are they protecting their own systems? That's really important, because if they're not, hackers can use the vendor systems to get into your systems. Some of the most famous and well-publicized data breaches out there happen because someone put a piece of malware in a vendor system. And I'll give you an example we all probably have heard about, and that's the Target breach. It was one of the first major breaches out there where it got a lot of headlines. That breach happened because of an HVAC vendor tapping into Target's system, and the vendor had malware in its system, and it made its way into Target's system, and the rest is really unfortunate history. There are lawsuits, class actions all over the place about Target. It has paid, untold millions of dollars because of that breach, and that's because of that vendor. So ask your vendors. There are questionnaires that all kinds of vendors are getting now. We're getting as law vendors, as legal vendors, as law advisors. We get those questionnaires from our clients. What are your data security protections? And we expect to get them. We expect to answer them. So don't think, I don't want to bother these people. It's important, and everyone's expecting to get questionnaires about their cybersecurity protections if their systems create risks for your systems. So think about all these different components. Uh, get a hold of a good questionnaire out there. You may be able to find a decent one on the internet. I can help. Other cybersecurity attorneys can help put together the right questionnaire for your vendors. If you're not doing that, again, a plaintiff's lawyer is going to come by and say, "You didn't do that. You're negligent. You're liable to me," because it's a bare minimum standard of conduct to check the vendor. So you got to be doing this.
Right. Well, yeah, can't be too careful. My gosh. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Uncover every base.
You really do. You really, and it's not just your bases, it's your vendors' bases, your business partners, anyone who touches your information systems. You have to figure out what they're doing and help them. It's a team effort. It takes a village. It really does. Everyone needs to be working together. This is not adversarial. People are not going to be turned off because you're asking about their cybersecurity. In fact, they're going to appreciate it because it lifts all. And that's why I think it's so important to reach out and figure out what these third parties are doing.
Well, you're bringing some very sobering points, Hillard. Thank you.
I told you it's not going to be great news.
No, but it's important, very important.
Thank you. Why don't we talk about policies? So
Okay.
the next slide, we'll dig into some of those policies I referenced earlier, starting with email, because email is the area in which the hackers have the most success in penetrating your information systems. So you need to have really strong email policies in place that you and all of your colleagues are understanding and applying. And that requires, again, training. So what are these email policies talking about? They're making sure that people understand that email at work is to be used for business, not for pleasure. And it needs to have permissible content. This is something we all know everyone doesn't follow perfectly. Every one of us has an email system that they use once in a while, hopefully very incidentally, for personal purposes, sending things to friends. I get it. We all know that. And you can't say never, ever send a personal email from work, but it needs to be primarily for business purposes. Do not send any confidential or proprietary information unless it's encrypted. Office 365, again, is terrific technology to encrypt attachments on emails. Use them. Don't click on suspicious emails, documents, or links. If you get an email from someone in your company saying we need to send a wire transfer, that's a big red flag. Call that person, or better yet, walk over to that person's office. One of the challenges that is escalating here is that these phishing exercises, these suspicious emails, these are getting better and better because of artificial intelligence. Hackers are using AI just like all the rest of us, but they're using it better, stronger than we are, and for nefarious purposes. They're using artificial intelligence to tap into social media and to construct communications that look exactly like they came from you or your colleagues. So the written email is now very easy to mimic with the help of AI. And even worse, voice recognition is getting so sophisticated, and voice AI, vocal AI, where they have audio files that they can construct that sound just like it's your colleague by just taking a bit or a piece of something like this, perhaps a podcast or some video that you're on. You could run that through an AI program, and then you can create an audio file that sounds just like you stating something that you would never say. It's happening out there. And now video. These deep fake videos are really becoming used and exploited by these hackers. So even if you're looking at someone, like I'm looking at you now, I'm not positive that's you. I am, because I know you, and we've been talking, and such that we've been talking about various subjects where there would be some ability to detect it. But you need to be suspicious of even video calls when you ask someone to confirm that a wire request is legitimate. You may not be talking to that person, or looking at that person. You may be looking and talking to a deep fake. So The best way to verify information, if you can do it, walk down the hall, look at that person. So far, no one's come up with that technology yet. So it's interesting, sort of ironic, and it's a paradox that as technology gets more and more advanced, the way to protect yourself is to get less and less technological, to use the good old days, the prehistoric modes of communication, where it's voice to voice, or better yet, face to face, to verify that this very advanced technology is not spoofing you. So, all these email policies are really important. Make sure that your policy covers all these issues. And again, you're right, Nell, you could pull these off the internet. I bet they don't have all these on there. Get a good one, refine it, and then you're covered if you're training your employees. And that's also true for mobile devices, which is on the next slide. It's worth a pause because just like emails, mobile devices are so prevalent. Everyone's using them. Everyone has cell phones, of course, and they have work apps on there and non-work apps. So you need to be educating and informing and training your employees on how they should and should not be using their mobile devices. They should be only used for acceptable purposes. That needs to be defined. You shouldn't be using and accessing non-work websites if you have work apps on there. What are you doing in terms of your IT support and maintenance of these mobile devices? Are you, like we all get updates from Apple or Samsung, whoever the vendor is, are sending you updates. Are you using those updates, those security patches? Or are you just saying, that's just a gimmick? It's not a gimmick. A lot of these updates and new versions have stronger security protections. So if you confirm that this is really an update and it's a regular update on your cell phone, use it. Is your mobile device password protected? We talked about remote wiping. Is it enabled that way? It needs to be in the policy, so all employees are using that, and they're being trained to use that. So email and mobile devices are critically important for policy purposes, and what we looked at in the last two slides have to be in there, and you have to be training your employees on every single one of these sub-bullet points.
Wow, these are great tangible practices to put into place. Thank you for the detail that you're going into here.
My pleasure.
Very useful.
Why don't we talk about reducing your footprint? Are you managing your data? Are you destroying and certainly reducing the amount of bad or negative data that you have? So this is true with email, and we were talking about this earlier. You absolutely should have an aggressive retention/destruction policy in place. What you're doing, I always refer to it this way: you're writing exhibits, you're saving exhibits for your employees, and that gets to writing exhibits too. If you're involved in a difficult, contentious issue with a customer, for example, are you sending emails about that internally without having that protected under that attorney-client privilege, which it probably isn't because you're not sending it to a lawyer for purposes of getting legal advice? You're writing exhibits. Before you write an email, I want you to picture that email in back of you on that 20-foot screen at a trial and ask yourself, do I really want to be testifying under oath about what I'm about to write? Pick up the phone. Verbal communications are so much better when you're dealing with contentious, difficult issues that you don't necessarily need to memorialize in writing. So don't create smoking guns that your adversaries could pick up and try to destroy you with. And that's particularly important with self-critical analyses or investigations. We're about to talk about this. Let's say you get breached. And in fact, why don't we go to the next slide, because this point about protecting your communications is especially important when it comes to actions during and after a data breach. Also before, but during and after, a plaintiff is going to be focused with laser-like intensity on trying to get all of your emails and texts around the time frame that you were breached. So the second you think that you've been breached, you should call one of two people or companies. The first one is your insurance company. If you have cybersecurity insurance, which I'm going to suggest strongly you get if you don't have it already, you need to call your insurance company. They will put a program in place that will create this umbrella of the attorney-client privilege. If you don't have cyber insurance, the second phone call that you really should be making is to your outside lawyer. Again, that's not a commercial. I'm not just pitching that. It's a reality, because once you get an outside lawyer involved, even if you're kind of sure you have cyber insurance, but you're not, you just have business interruption insurance or general liability insurance. If you call an outside lawyer, immediately that lawyer, if that lawyer understands what he or she is doing, will put in a program in place to manage and protect your communications. They will tell you, don't send anything unless it's to me as well. Don't send anything unless it also includes a header on it that says privileged and confidential, or attorney-client privileged, or attorney-client communication. It needs to have something there to signal that it's a protected communication. On email, they'll tell you to stop texting. And they'll tell you, like, get your communications with your employees organized and managed too. Because, some of the worst communications are for people who don't even know what they're talking about. If you get breached and one of your employees, who may or may not be disgruntled already, hears about it, you don't want that person sending an email to their friends saying, we blew it again. That email is going to be Exhibit A at trial. And you'll have to explain, oh, this person didn't know what they were talking about. It's not really a good place to be. So you have to communicate to your employees about the importance of eliminating their discoverable communication and inform them properly. And there are all kinds of rules about that if you're undertaking an investigation. So let me summarize it this way. Don't try this at home. Okay, if you think you're breached or you get breached, don't try to do self-help here. I've seen a lot of data breach cases where the companies think they're going to do it themselves, and it never, ever works well. There's a really sad story about a chief security officer at Uber, who, when Uber was breached, and this gentleman decided, I'm going to take care of this. I don't even want to report it. We already had a breach. I'm just going to take care of this myself. Just Google this. This is a story. This gentleman, unfortunately, was prosecuted. He was one of the first persons brought up on criminal charges because of his conduct trying to hide the fact of a data breach. I'm not suggesting, and by the way, he did not serve any prison time, and he actually, the result turned out okay for him. But it's an egregious example of the importance of not doing self-help. You need help on this stuff, just like your clients, your customers. You don't want them practicing what you do at home, undertaking their own treatments. They need professionals, and so do you in the area of cybersecurity.
I love the sprinkling of stories that you bring to make the point. They are very helpful.
Unfortunately, there's a lot more out there. If I had another couple hours, I've got about 50 more war stories. But everyone could go out there and do their own research, just to see that this is real. The risks are real, and they could be material. So, please take this stuff seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we talk about hiring a breach coach? I think that starts with the next slide now. There we go. Perfect. So you get breached, and I said, call one of two people. Call your insurance company or call your outside lawyer. Your outside lawyer, if that's your second call, here's what they're going to do. If it's the first call, the insurance company is going to hire a breach coach, who's this outside counsel, to quarterback. They call them breach coaches. I think they're really more appropriately called breach quarterbacks, because they're on the field, they're running plays, they're an active part of the team, and they're moving the ball down the field in a coherent, cohesive, strategically effective way with their teams. So that's what breach coaches do. So they need to get the team together. They need to be focusing on technology, people, Public relations perhaps needs to be part of this. If the data breach has been publicized, if you're getting calls from reporters, that needs to be managed properly so you're not saying something that also is going to turn into an exhibit. Get your breach coach involved, and they'll do all of these things that we've been talking about: managing your communications, avoiding the careless creation of emails and other documentation. They'll issue litigation hold notices, which we do all the time as soon as we get involved. It tells the clients two things. One, preserve everything you have. The worst thing that you could do if you think something bad has happened, and this isn't just cybersecurity, this applies to any dispute. If you're in dispute with a company or someone, a person, the worst thing you could do is start thinking, I'm going to delete some stuff because I'm not proud of it. That can open you up to sanctions by a court because that's called evidence spoliation. You don't want to go there. That creates a case within a case. All of a sudden, the case doesn't matter. It's what did you do with that document and why? And you deleted it. And you could lose cases just by the way you handled your evidence when the case, even before the case started. If you have the reasonable foreseeability of legal risk, you have a litigation hold duty. You have a duty under the law to preserve all your information. So you have to preserve, and at the same time, you need to protect. You need to protect this information that you're generating so you're not, again, creating exhibits. So breach coaches do this all the time, and I strongly urge you to make sure if you think something bad happened, get a breach coach involved, let them orchestrate the effort, and they'll put together the systems that you need to follow.
Where does one find a breach coach, Hillard?
We're out there. Every major law firm, well, most major law firms have cybersecurity departments, and so a lot of these cybersecurity departments do breach coaches. But the best way now to find one is to go to your insurance company. They have lists of breach coaches that they use and they trust. Also, that with whom they've negotiated favorable rates, because every insurance policy has deductibles, right? So we're going to talk about that in a minute. So you want to make sure your deductible is low, but that you're spending that money wisely. If you're out there doing self-help and you're spending money left and right, you're not going to have that count to the deductible. If you are spending money before you make an insurance claim, then you're going to have to respend it all more money just to get from the 0 point to the deductible. So that's another reason to get in touch with your insurance company right away. So every dollar you're spending are dollars that count to the deductible, or what they call self-insured retention. Same thing, effectively.
Fantastic. Is this a role that you serve too, Hillard?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do a lot of breach coaching, breach quarterbacking, as I was saying.
Awesome.
Absolutely. So I work on the pre-breach and the post-breach side.
Awesome. Well. Really good to know.
Thank you. Thank you. And we're kind of running a little short on time now, so let me talk about the response briefly.
Okay.
These are those tabletop exercises I mentioned, and I already made many of these points, but I want to emphasize a couple. You need to watch out that you're running these well. You need to have the right scenario. So you can't do your own tabletop exercises without two team players that outside counsel I was talking about, but also a technology company that runs these. There are all kinds of cybersecurity companies that work on the technology side. They run these tabletop exercises. They know the scenarios that they want to put you through. They probably have incident response plans that they could provide. So you need them to the table, because if you just sit in a table, do a tabletop exercise, and you're guessing about what a scenario should be, how it should be run, what the right steps are, you're doing more damage than you are good. So get the technologists to the table as well as the outside lawyers. So you're really doing valuable exercises and not just wasting time, or worse, writing bad documents based upon inappropriate or inaccurate scenarios that really don't address true cyber risks. You just created.
So this is a good place to start, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be to hire someone, a professional, to come and run the tabletop exercise so that you can start the process?
Absolutely. And I work with some really great technology companies who do tabletop exercises. And so,
Oh,
If
I'm
someone
I'm
wants
sure you do.
it's really helpful because you want to be working with someone who knows what they're doing, who has done it hundreds, if not thousands of times. You don't need to reinvent any wheels here. They're there. Um,
Right.
if you want to try to go the cheap way, unfortunately, you get what you pay for.
You get what you pay for, exactly.
It's true with all of our jobs, right? And
Right. Well,
absolutely.
Hillard, you certainly make me feel very comfortable, and I would love to work with you more closely in this area.
Thank you.
I know you have to run, so
I
you've
could
given
finish if you
so
give me
much.
2 more minutes now. I could
Right?
finish.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
I'd much rather get through these because
Okay.
there's some real important points here. The next
Okay.
slide we've talked about already, and that's beware of the risks of disclosure. But I want everyone out there, if you doubt me, let's go back really briefly to that prior slide because there's a case on here called Capital One. Look it up. Look up Capital One breach Mandiant. Mandiant's a great, very strong cybersecurity company hired by a lawyer to do a post-breach analysis. They didn't protect that report like I've been suggesting they should have, and they had to hand it to the plaintiff's lawyer. And that report is just chock full of gold for a plaintiff's lawyer. It shows all the vulnerabilities and weaknesses in the systems, what they did and did not do in response to the breach. So this is just another war story I wanted to throw out there that everyone should be aware of. And so let's go to the next slide because now we're finishing with cyber insurance. Get it if you don't have it already. And even if you have it, it may not be as strong as you think. But cyber insurance, and I'll talk about that in a second. Cyber insurance is critically important because an insurance company can pay for all of these different types of costs and fines. Massively important. These could be debilitating expenses. One example, forensics expenses, the fourth bullet point. Wouldn't you rather have an insurance company paying for Mandiant or some other technology forensics firm to do all their work? You don't want to be paying that. That could be tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's why you get insurance. Notification costs, the next one. It costs a lot of money to notify customers if you've been breached. And every state has a notification law that requires you to notify customers if you've been breached. So don't you want your insurance company paying for those notification letters and putting those together so they're legally compliant? So these are all the different types of costs that insurance companies can cover if you have a good cyber policy. But going to the final slide now, cyber insurance doesn't cover everything. In fact, it probably isn't covering some of the risks that you have. So you need to get a good broker. That's my last bullet point. Get a good broker who knows cyber insurance, who knows the market, to take a quick look at your policy and tell you, is this good enough for me? Is this protective of my company? There are many different costs that cyber insurance may not be covering. If you've been negligent, the insurance carrier may not try to cover you. And there are sublimits that are very important. You may think you have $1 million limit on your policy, but then somewhere in your policy, usually on the first page, hopefully, there's a sublimit for something a lot lower than $1 million. Could be even as low as $10,000. And that's how much they'll cover all the way up to that and no more. So you may think, oh, I'm good. My policy has the words 1 million in it. So anytime something bad happens, the insurance company is going to pay for it all the way up to $1 million. There may be a provision in there that says, no, we're going to pay up to $10,000. And I just represented a regional healthcare network that had exactly that issue. They thought they had a substantial amount of insurance. They only had $10,000 worth. Unfortunately, I was able to get their case dismissed. But yeah, it's a bad day at the office when
Yes.
you realize that you're not covered like you think you are. So
Not even remotely.
yes. So that covers it. And I hope that I've given everyone at least a few tangible steps and tips to walk away with. Is a very important area. If anyone has any questions, I'm sure have my information through Nell. In fact, I see it scrolling on the bottom, and I'm sure it'll be posted somewhere. Reach out. I don't start the clock and send an engagement letter unless you really need help. I'm happy to answer questions. I want to help people out there.
Hillard, this is excellent. This is over the top. way beyond what I was expecting. Very detailed, very helpful. I'd love to have you back because
Thank you.
you are quite a storyteller, and all of these stories that you have shared with us are impactful, very impressive, and very sobering. Thank you so much, Hillard.
Thank you so much.
I know you have to take off for another meeting, Hillard. You're a very busy man, and thank you. And we'll have you back, hopefully.
I look forward to that, Nell. I hope so. Thank you so much, and thank you all out there. And I'll finish with a good old line from a good old TV show called Hill Street Blues. You may remember. Be careful out there. Thanks a lot.
You got it.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Hillary.
Bye
Take
now.
good care. Talk
You as well.
later.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye. All right, everybody. Very impressive stuff. So you heard it here. The importance of having a good cybersecurity plan in place for your medical spa or any of you who are owners of other types of businesses. Very important. Hackers are looking for the weakest link. Don't be that weak link. It affects not only you, but everyone who works with you, as you heard. So until the next time, be safe, be happy, and take care. Bye for now.